I'm letting people in now. Hi, everyone. We'll be starting soon. My name is Louisa Uliette, and I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographers Gallery. Hi, everyone. We'll be beginning in a moment. My name is Louisa Uliette, and I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographers Gallery. Thanks for joining us. Great. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Louisa Uliette, and I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographers Gallery. And I'm delighted to introduce this evening's speakers, artist Namsa Leuba and curator and writer Nomusa Makhubu. Based in Bordeaux and Cape Town, respectively, today we'll be diving into Namsa's practice, looking a bit more deeply into her work around color and questions on world making and how these themes of race and colonialism are represented in her work. With us today is curator and writer Nomusa Makhubu. Nomusa is Associate Professor of Art History and Deputy Dean of Transformation and Humanities at the University of, I'm sorry, I cut that off, and is also founder of the Creative Knowledge Project, the Creative Knowledge Resources Project. In terms of format, we will begin with presentations from Namsa Leuba, where she will also talk a little bit more about her new book, Crossbooks. Following that, she'll be in discussion with Nomusa for approximately 30 minutes before we open up to the discussion to questions and comments from you. You can submit your questions here using the chat function, or they can be posed directly to them by raising the blue hand function on Zoom. We will then ask you to unmute yourself. The event should last roughly 1 hour in total. Please notice we are recording this. However, you will not be featured and will only appear at the end if you decide to pose your question directly. We are approaching this event with the aim of creating a forum of trust and mutual respect, so please keep that in mind. And yeah, before we start, I would like to thank you all again for joining us. We hope to see you again at some of our other forthcoming online activities, and even more hopefully at the gallery when we open again this coming Friday with a retrospective of American photographer Helen Levitt and a new commission by British artist Helen Kamek. And anyway, thank you all again. And now to Namsa Leuba and Nomusa Makhubu.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. It is an absolute pleasure to moderate this engagement with Namsa Leuba and to discuss her illustrious photographic work, you know, and for this artist talk that's facilitated by the Photographers Gallery. So last year in 2020, the exhibition Crossed Looks was shown at the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art in Charleston. It featured works from Namsa's projects from Guinea, Nigeria, Benin, South Africa, and Tahiti. And it was organized by the curator, Joseph Gergel, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who is based in Nigeria. Namsa needs no introduction. For most of us, of course, we have encountered her amazing work. But to briefly introduce her, she is an award-winning Swiss-Guinean photographer and art director who holds a master's in art direction. To name a few of her many achievements, she was the recipient of the first prize at the Planche Contact Festival in Deauville in 2010. And in 2012, she was awarded the Photo Global Prize at the Photography Festival in France. She was the winner of the Magenta Foundation Flash Forward Festival in 2013. And she's participated in a number of international exhibitions, such as Lagos Photo in Nigeria, Making Africa a Continent of Contemporary Design at the Guggenheim in Spain, Africa Reframed in Copenhagen in Denmark, and off-print at the Tate Modern in London. And again, I mean, I won't necessarily name all of these. And she's been commissioned by major brands such as Nike, The New Yorker, where she created a photographic series with emerging Afrobeats musicians in Lagos in 2018. Moreover, she's also produced fashion campaigns with Christian Lacroix and has produced fashion series for Adun and Dior. and has collaborated with Dior to create 2 Lady Dior art bags. So today we engage with her series of works. And for most of us who have seen it, it's works that enable us to open up discussions about the politics of representation, in-betweenness, hybridity, multeity. Her work bridges across art, design, and fashion. And it shifts, in the way that it's positioned in terms of the many geographical locations. So just as Louisa mentioned, we will open up for questions from the audience in the last 15 minutes of the session, but I do encourage you to post your questions during the presentation so that we already have a sense of what it is you want asked and you want answered. Namsa, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about your work. To begin, and also just as a way to segue into your presentation, could you explain the title Crossed Looks, particularly its meaning and significance?
Hi, Nomusa, and hi, everyone. Thank you to be here with us. Yeah, so crossed looked means in Malinké, so my mother tongue. In Malinké, no, crossed look means Malinké Nyakalaben. And Nyakalaben was one of my first works that I've done when I was in Guinea. I can show you some picture. Attendez, wait. I'm gonna share my screen like that. You can have an idea. I'll just wait. Up, voilà. This series, okay. So just a restart. So crossed looks means Nyakalaben in Malinké, and it makes sense to name my book Crossed Looks because I have a double heritage, I have a double origin. I am mixed. Huh? My father is from Switzerland, and my mother, she's from Guinea. And through my work as well, I like to I speak about I work on African identities through the Western eyes. And I say through the Western eyes because I grew up and I was born in Switzerland, so in Europe. And I think if I was born or rise up in Guinea or what else, I think I would have another maybe look as well on my work. And so Nyakalaben, I realized that work when I was in Guinea, and I decided to explore some different artifacts that are from the Guinea cosmogony. And the things that it was really interesting for me, it was to recontextualize this statuette, to put in other context, to reconstruct a body in different way, and as well to use human being because like that they're already alive, because normally it's only the marabout could animate them by the mind because they are only tools, and for this statuette represent fertility, strength, power, richness, hope, or whatever. And for this series, because I put in other contexts, because normally you're not supposed to see in the wooden statuette like that. I was arrested by the police as well. I had some violent reaction because it was not in their own context, and I put them as well in different holy places in Guinea. Voilà. And after that work, you know, I decided, I had the opportunity to work with another magazine and to make something a little bit different, much more colorful, brightful, as well, and to speak about the feminine archetype, and to play with as well the costume and the outfit, and as well to explore much more the different stereotype and the exotism as well, that we can the exotism, and to explore as well the African culture imaginaries that we can have, and I use different props as well to create that series. And for me as well, in my works, the representation of the woman, it's very something it's very something for me important, because I like to put them like in a stadium, in a podium. And then I've been, you can see in my work, in my book, I've been in South Africa, that I spent a lot of time in South Africa, and I created the series, the Khoisan Kingdom of Mountain, in Lesotho, the Zulu Kids, and the Ndebele pattern. And what I wanted, you can see, it's blocked. Let's go. Voilà. And for this series, I wanted to explore the traditional culture and the different aesthetic as well, and to play with hybridity, cultural hybridity, and to try to traduct as well in different ways the African tradition as well. And I like in my work as well to do a kind of cultural syncretism, to mix different culture together to create something new. And I think for me, it's something that I like it, to reinvent something and to create my own reality, because what I show is not the reality. I show a reality. And we don't find this kind of people like that. And the thing that I like is like, it's different where you are from. Sometimes people ask me, oh, have you found the people like that? And I say, no, absolutely not. I just I create all the stage, you know, to make the pictures. And it depends where you are from. Some people think that I found the people like that. If you know, or if you know about the culture a little bit more, you know that it doesn't exist at all, you know. And it's very interesting how sometimes in the collective memory, people think that in Africa we can find this kind of people already like that, and it's totally not. And for the series Zulu Kids, I mix like the Zulu culture with the voodoo religion, and voodoo religion is absolutely not practiced in South Africa. But I think it was for me very interesting to do kind of like syncretism, you know, with that. And as well, I mix and with some movement anti-apartheid gesture, like the feast, like burning passports, like the passport that they were supposed to have during the apartheid, and different stuff, you know. And when I was doing that work, it was very well accepted in South Africa, because they don't practice voodoo, as I said already before. And they were very curious about that work. Ah, my God, okay, we don't know how it works for voodoo, but it's really interesting how you mix. They were very curious. I did not have a violent reaction. I was very welcoming in South Africa when I was doing my all different work. And just as well before, Nomusa spoke about that I've made a collaboration with Dior, and it was inspired the pattern by NAA culture, you know, NAA culture, like the woman makes some beautiful graphic pattern on the houses, and me, I decided with a reflector to take the picture, the reflection of one tradition, and on my reflection, I totally changed and modified, was changing the reflector was changing the reflection, and I show one point of view of my vision, of my look of the NAA person right now, if at that moment, and but as well, like how we can reinvent, how we can see in different ways this culture and tradition. And we can see just at the bottom how from my picture, how we can have the Lady Dior bag. Tenkema, it was a commission that I had the opportunity to make it. And it was very interesting because for that commission, I was inspired by the Nyamu. The Nyamu are the devil from the holy forest in High Guinea. And I've made this picture I took from my work, Nyakalaben as well. We can see in my edition, and I met these people in the forest, and I took the picture of them, and they exist in Lola in Nzerekore. And for the commission, I was inspired by the Nyamu. So we can see after the results of the series that I've made later in South Africa. Oh, super. I think it's frozen. But like here, it's a series totally different that I realized in Nigeria, in Lagos, and I wanted to explore the innovation, the creativity of the young culture of Nigeria. And for that series, I was inspired by the chaos, by the dynamism, the good vibes as well of Lagos. And I made a collaboration as well with different designer, fashion designer, and different artists as well. And as when I create and I did some stylism as well for that series. And I totally imagined the different stories for each one, and I like it to imagine as well something surrealistic and psychedelic as well. And in my work, I like as well. So most of the time, you know, when it's not a command, I like to work with unprofessional people, you know, because there is something that you can have with unprofessional, something maybe you can guide much more them, and I like to have something very authentic and deep, and an exchange as well with them. And I like to make this collaboration as well. For me, is very important. So I do a casting in the street or in the village to find them. And this work I've made when I was when I was in Benin, and speak about voodoo, and I reinterpret as well a different figure of the voodoo, and reinvented as well some of them. And the last work that I would like to speak about, it was illusions that I've made in French Polynesia. It speaks as well about identity. It speaks about dysphoria of gender. And for that work, I was as well very inspired by Paul Gauguin, and in this palette of colors, and as well all the Fauvisme period as well for the colors. So it's kind of very colorful as well. And I was inspired by the pose as well of Paul Gauguin. And I wanted to create some new creature as well. And all my models are Mahu or Rere, and Mahu are a man. And they have all the femininity, all the variety of a man, all the sensibility of the woman, and they exist from the beginning of the Polynesian culture. And when the missionary came in French Polynesia, they say, you can't. You can be the third gender if you want, like a man or woman, you know, and they were a little bit hidden from all these years. But now they exist again, and the Rere are a woman, and she's a transgender. As we can see, she's a transgender. And all the body are very colorful and colored, because for me, we don't care about the color. We are just, we just care about the identity and who we are, you know. And I wanted as well to put them on the podium, you know. And I wanted as well to catch what they have inside of themselves, and the beauty of themselves. Voilà, and they pose like as well like a vahaini, like a woman in Polynesia. But all my models, if you want, are men for this one. This is a mahu. Voilà. Voilà, thank you. It was a brief introduction of my work. Like that, you can have an idea. And please let me know if you would like to have much more information or.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I'm just gonna maybe quick. Do I still share my?
Oh, I stopped it. But
okay,
you can share
great.
it again.
Okay, great.
Okay.
It's off, so we can get right into it. So I'm sure there are many questions that the audience wants to ask, but I have a few that I'll begin with. And so I think also because I think as you were giving the presentation, there were quite a few themes that were coming through that, you know, in some ways, you know, show up in a number of the series of works that you have done. And one of them, of course, is the trope of scientific racism. So your work is sometimes discussed in relation to the trope of scientific racism that's been generated through anthropological colonial photography. So what are your reflections in terms of this evocation of, as you mentioned earlier, exoticism, but also, you know, how you're altering the primitivist aesthetic in your work? That's the first part of the question. So maybe let's start there, and then we'll move to the second part of it.
Yeah, but as I already said before, you know, we know the African history of the photography, and I think a lot of things stay in our memory collective, and I like as well, like, I think now the thing is very cool that the Black people or the people origin from Africa take the power or take the things like to show their own reality and to show as well their look, you know. And me as well, I play sometimes with a lot of stereotype, and I like to reinvent as well my vision, my look, and to reinvent, you know, the history of African as well photography, and I try to show one authenticity, but my picture are not the reality. It's a reality, and as well what I show, it's like a docu-fiction. Like there is a part that it's true, like the voodoo, it exists, you know, but or the animism exists, but then I try to tell my story, and it starts to be like a fiction.
Thank you. And so, I mean, I guess the second part of that question was to think about what the future possibilities are, right? So in that playfulness, you know, in playing with older tropes, newer tropes, putting things together, you know, as you were saying, it's about sort of bringing things that, you know, that don't mesh together. So within that playfulness, what would you say are the future possibilities for the representation of, you know, fluid identities that your work engenders?
I think we can't. We have a lot of possibilities to do what we want. I think me, I would like to show just a reality, and I would like to evoke the time, the emotions as well. Maybe I don't know if I really don't understand engender.
Yeah, future possibilities.
I think now we are totally like free to do almost like what we want, you know, and I think we have all the cards in your hands, you know. I think to show the new Africa, you know, by Black people or by people from origin from that country, from that continent as well.
Yeah, and okay, so I mean, I think there's something quite interesting in the different scales of representation, because, you know, on one hand, there's, you know, how you're engaging with the, you know, the broader scale and I guess conceptual notion of Africa and how we perceive it. And yet at the same time, we're also looking and zooming into specific people that are being portrayed. And even there's playfulness and, you know, and how you bring in props and all of this. So could you define how you approach, or what your approach is to portraiture? You know, so how do you characterize the use of masks, both as symbolic and aesthetic? but even some of the props that you bring in, you know, just to get a sense of your approach to portraiture.
After the portrait, you know, from the about the portrait and I was very inspired by the masquerade as well, you know, by the mask, because from my mother's side, I am animist. So we use a lot of masks, you know, so there is something that's animate myself, you know, and all the costume as I said we use, like it's something very tradition, you know, and as well the mask is something there is as well a power, there is something as well symbolic, so it means as well something, and then as well the makeup, it means as well something, how you decided as well to do it, and how you decide as well to use the props and to create after your image, or to add on your models. And in my picture I want to evoke his existence, to explore the emotions as well. As I said as well before, I think it's very interesting how where we are as well in the world, it's like sometimes it depends the influence of our environment as well, but sometimes we think that it's the truth, and it's not. In my picture everything is fake, you know. There is some real information, but then it's like it's like mixed.
Yeah. So something that's also, I mean, something that's really sort of prominent about your work is juxtaposition, but also exuberant color. I mean, that's the first thing that stands out. And the one
it's like I like to do like I like doing performance, you know, as well in my work.
Yes. I mean, it's, you know, so I mean, it's in some ways, and it's interesting that you mentioned performance, because, you know, not only do we see the exuberant color, but it's almost as if the figures are in the surreal in their setting. So it's like a theater backdrop in some ways, right? It's very theatrical. So for example, in the work Illusions, African Queens, Weke, Plant, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Planted. Yeah. So in these work, there is that fantastic, you know, theatrical, painterly aesthetic. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but if you do, would you say that a lot of these, you know, I mean, you mentioned Fauvism earlier, that there are many painterly traditions that also influence your photographic work?
You know, I think I have a double heritage, and I think all my European influence me for the code, for the aesthetic, as well, maybe for the posture in my pictures. And I think all my African side inspired me, influenced my work about the colors, about the I have a lot of as well inspiration about the rituals, the traditions as well in Africa, and all those things influence as well my work. But my two sides influence me in different way for my work.
Fantastic. So the one series of works that's noticeably distinct, right? So I mean, in all the other works, we're very much aware of these, you know, sort of stage set, colorful, performed, you know, photographs. But there was also the Black Panther series, you know, which was shot in black and white documentary style. And, you know, it focuses particularly on the civil rights movement and on race. Could you speak about this series a little bit, you know, pertaining to perhaps maybe this interrelation between race and color, But yeah, I guess in terms of the representation of Black liberation struggles.
So for that edition, you know, I decided to do a reenactment of Black Panthers. So it means all the pictures I took and I've made in Switzerland, you know, like almost like 10 years ago, something like that. And I really like it to play with different cameras and to use different as well film, you know, like that you can have in the book, you can feel and see different texture and grain of the pictures. And like that you have the feeling that sometimes it's like historical pictures, or I just cut in the newspaper the pictures and I put, you know, in the book. And sometimes the picture is much more clean. Sometimes it's a bit rough, you know. And I really like it to play with different type of texture for that book, you know, like to have the feeling that I picked different picture in different places, you know, to create that book. But at the end, I just create at the same time the pictures, you know. But it was very interesting to do that, you know, and to speak about the civil rights and all the things in that book.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but would you be able to share any images from the Black Panther series? Do you have any? We just had a request from the audience.
Okay.
I don't know.
I could. I could possibly share screen from the book.
Oh yeah, do you have with you?
Oh, it's PDF. I'm not sure if that's going to be okay.
Wait.
Okay, do you have them?
Let me check. Where? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, okay?
Thank you.
Voilà. On fait. Voilà. Like that, you can have an idea of my work of the Black Panthers that I've made in Switzerland in 2010, I think. Voilà. But the feeling that it's a picture that I found in the press, you know what I mean? And it was all the goal, you know?
Yes. So, I mean, earlier you mentioned that you like to work with, you know, unprofessional collaborators and performers. Was it the case with this series?
Yeah. Again, you know, all the people are found, you know, like I did the cast, like a casting around my around me, you know, to find the right people. Yeah. Like, you know, the most of the time, if I work with professionals, it will be only for like commission, and we don't have really the choice. So I will work with that. Or after, it depends as what the concept, of course.
I see. Okay, so I'm going to move on in the interest of time, because I see that we are almost, you know, almost reaching the 15-minute mark. But I wanted to ask this question, you know, because I mean, as I think about your work, you know, in terms of recreating identities, recreating spaces, moving across different locations, in some ways your work is alluding to ways of world making. So that's the ways in which we create and comprehend the worlds we live in, which are worlds that are assembled through images, symbols, beliefs, perceptions, and so on. In an interview, I think, in Metal magazine, you say, I want to make the invisible visible and to deconstruct a body to rebuild it in another context. So through your work, you do refer to these many locations in which you have worked and with which you identify, which opens up the questions around body and place. So how do you represent or approach the representation of space as well? I mean, initially we're talking about, particularly portraiture and people, but how do you think about the representation of space as the domain of self-fashioning?
I think for me, the things that I like to do, that when I speak about, I try to make visible the invisible, because when I do my work, when I was in Guinea, when I was in Benin, when I am in the country that we practiced animist religion, I practice. It means that I went to meet some different witch doctor with different marabout, and I did some rituals, to know more and to live the experience, and like that, I am inspired much more and better as well to do my picture. So I know exactly what I speak about, and then I would like to traduce with my different filters, of my experiences, what I live during my rituals. I would like to create and my pictures, and it inspired me to create my work. So it means I try to make visible the invisible, It's this, and even after you try, but it's very difficult you can't show even like everything, and after you can choose only some few things, and after you can tell all the things, that you have lived, because it's reserved for the initiate people as well, So you try to show one part of the invisible to make it visible to the people,
So one last question.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you define your process, your working process as collaborative. Now, most people, you have the photographer, you have the sitter, right? Or you have the subject who is being.
But as well, in my work, I stay to the country. I don't go to a country and I stay only 1 or 2 weeks. The most of the time, I stay between 2 and 1 year and a half, or the most it was 3 years. So I know. I don't go to a place and just take my picture and then voila. I speak a lot with the old people, or with the ancient, or with the community. I am very interesting. I try to know better and to do my best, in the community as well, to exchange and to learn. And
So the idea of collaborative work, how important is this distinction to you, and how significant is it in your work? If it's collaborative process.
Yeah. I think it's very, for me, it's important as well to live well this experience, to traduce with my different filter in my picture then.
Brilliant. I haven't seen any questions from the audience. Louisa, I'm wondering if we may be receiving some.
We've had a couple, actually. So shall I read one of them just to get us started?
Yes, please.
There's one from Janice, who's asking a little bit more about your work as a collaboration. So do you view it as a collaboration with your portrait subjects? Do they bring their own ideas, clothing, props, energy, or experience to those sessions?
I didn't understand the beginning.
How much of your work is a collaboration with your portrait subjects?
But it's a collaboration because they spend times as well with me, you know, and they agree to be part of that project. So it's a collaboration, and yeah, we speak, and there's an exchange, and they tell me as well the life. After it depends on the projects, but I explain each time well what I will do and how they feel, how they would like as well sometimes to be. And so for me, it's a collaboration.
So what does that collaboration sort of entail? Like, do you talk with them?
Some of them, you know, like I talk all time with them, all time. I don't just pick one and I say, okay, come, I'm gonna take a picture of you and that's it and bye. No. I spend time as well with them, and I try to explain to them, and sometimes I've met them different times, you know, and some of them as well, it depends of the project. I interview them as well to know them much better, and to like that I could in a better way, you know, to make a pose of them, you know, good in my pictures, and like that as well, you know, when there is an exchange and we can speak well together, they can feel as well much better and much more confident as well in my picture.
Thank you. You can definitely see that strength, I think, in a lot of those images. There's another question here from Rebecca. She says, thank you for such wonderful work, first of all. And she's asking if you can say a little bit more about your use of voodoo. And, you know, itself is a very hybrid religion. So it would be, it's so interesting that you further bring it in by incorporating these other references to draw attention to the wide histories and the multiple origins. So can you say a little bit more about your use of voodoo?
Voodoo, I've done several practice when I was there, and I wanted as well to show the hybridity, the cultural hybridity in as well in a voodoo, and through my filter I try to reinvent and to recreate a new work, you know. And as well, I put them in different places I recontextualize them as well in different places in Benin, you know, and I put them in different contexts as well.
Let's see. Do keep your questions coming. We have a couple more minutes before we have to wrap things up tonight. I have a question of my own. You mentioned, and Nomusa touched on it as well, but you mentioned your interest in Fauvism, and you started to talk about the rituals and traditions from Africa. And I was wondering, you know, what other moments in art history do you look to for inspiration? Is there something around performance that maybe you want to say that where you draw different kinds of gestures, or yeah, I'd just be interested to know what else you're looking at.
But I was very inspired as well by the Fauvisme, you know, and primitivism, Fauvisme, about the colors, you know, and otherwise I think, you know, sometimes the pose or the portrait or for the portrait, the pose are much more sometimes classical, and this I think is from much more the Europe style, you know.
I was wondering if there's anyone who is in the Zoom room who also has a question. if you do, please raise a hand. But I suppose perhaps in relation to that question is around, the fact that the particular work, the Fauvist work that you reference is, of course, part and parcel of the primitivist aesthetic.
Mhm.
So how are you engaging with, our understanding of, how primitivism shaped the way in which we understand the politics around modernism, especially in relation to the views on the African continent? So how comfortable is that?
I like, playing with the ambiguity, as well. And I think even in Africa, it's such a huge continent. So there is so many culture, and it's even in Africa, the things, when I was in South Africa and I've shown my work in Nyakalaben, a guy came to me and said, "Oh, you have found the people get dressed like that?" And I say, So even in Africa, it could be the same thing, like even everywhere in the world, that there is such many cultures that you can't know all of them, And it was very interesting to see that even in Africa, if you don't know the culture of another country or of another ethnies, but they have the feeling that it's like that, but not, because all my work, most of them is like docu-fiction, and I like to play with different with the ambiguity, with different tradition, with ouais, to show the reality,
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I mean, yeah, there's that interesting sort of references from the canonical, movements in, modernist movements. But there's something else that's quite interesting that happens with the way that you reference, say, for example, the Ndebele patterns. And I was wondering if you could just give me a sense of why particularly the Ndebele patterns. I mean, it's interesting because, the one artist that's really well known for it is Esther Mahlangu. And Esther, of course,
I met her.
to do it for BMW. So what happens in this sort of shift from, the Ndebele patterns on houses and on these commodities like, the Dior bags and, for Esther Mahlangu, I think it was the BMW, and I can't
yeah.
But so this kind of like translation of something like the Ndebele patterns on commodities, particularly.
But it's like to make a decontextualization as well, of one things, and I reconstruct different visual code, through my reflection of this, because I took the Ndebele reflection through a reflector, and this it's modified, changed. So it's mean after I took my vision of this culture, what it could be now, and I like to reinvent, and it's totally different. My reflection, my pictures that I took of the reflection of that culture, and it's very graphic, but it's graphic in different way as well. And I would like just to show another image of this local tradition, and I think after, when it was on the bag, it's another story. So that that this culture keep going to live, but in different ways as well. And I think it's cool, you know. And all in my work, I like to play with them, as I say, but I with a different ideology, different archetype, different stereotypes, different visual codes, and I like to reinvent and to create another authenticity, you know.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. We've reached
to you. Huh?
We've reached the end of the session, and I really wanted, you know, just to thank Louisa, Photographers Gallery, and most importantly you, Namsa. But I wondered if you had any closing remarks before we end the session.
No, but thank you everyone to be here. To have been here tonight and to have listened to us. And thank you so much, Nomusa, for this talk. And thank you as well, Louisa, for permit to do this tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really great. And I'm sorry, Janice and Luke, that we weren't able to get to your last two questions, but thank you for joining us. Just wanted to say a couple of words before we end tonight. So yeah, thank you, especially to our speakers, Namsa Leuba and Nomusa Makhubu, for your amazing insight into your work, Namsa, and Nomusa also for just your incisive readings and yeah, reflections on Namsa's work. To my colleagues for their support tonight, and to you all for your ongoing commitment to the gallery. We wouldn't be here without you. And we continue to be grateful to be welcomed into your homes and to have the opportunity to share beautiful and important work of Namsa Leuba. So thank you. Anyway, I hope you're all okay and that we see you at some of our other forthcoming events, and even more hopefully at the gallery when we reopen on Friday with the work of Helen Levitt and Helen Kamek. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are, and see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks. Comment on fait?
I'll stop the sharing, but all right, I'll email you guys tomorrow morning. Okay.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.